I wanted to make a video. I mean, not that I have lots of subscribers, but the subscribers that are with us. I mean, I would think they're with us. Maybe because this channel is helping them. There may be some that want to know when I post a video so they can share it because they have bad intentions. But I can control neither kind of subscriber. So I'll just post this anyway. Not that I am a really important person to many. Maybe a slightly important person to very, very few. But I do want to address some things. The past week, when I've been out and about and around Saginaw County, specifically in Saginaw, I saw people making fun of the Holy Father's last blessing. I saw people making fun of his waves, when he's muster up what little strength he has. I saw people making fun of his place, in the how could I put it, in the history of the church and salvation, making fun of him, or even not patronizing, but not even criticizing, more than criticizing, insulting. And I think it's despicable, absolutely despicable. To make fun of somebody who's dying, let alone the leader of the Catholic world, the elected leader of the Catholic world. This is not a fascist dictatorship. Priests that are good are made into bishops. Every now and then you may get a bad bishop or a bad archbishop or a bad cardinal, but for the most part, these are good men. You can always find a bad apple in a bushel. So, there's no need to point the finger and say, look, that whole bushel is bad. There's 5 bad apples. No, that's not true. But that being said, you have some that are rather liberal, some that are rather conservative, and then some that don't sit on any political spectrum. They sit where the gospel sits. They sit in front of the gospel, not in front of a party, or like the 2 pope people. Until Pope Benedict passed, there were actually people that were 2 popes. Just like some people now, 2 presidents. Now we have 1 elected president, but you have some people that are, at least they're not refuting it, but they're certainly they're traumatized that it would actually happen a second time. But I stay away from politics. Both parties, I've found people in the parties have harmed my family, have caused trouble for us. And then both parties have friends in the 1% that, because Triple Canopy and Constellas, because of my complaint against them and my criticism and my letters to elected leaders and to contract management oversight agencies, they have targeted my family, including some of my coworkers targeting me. So I don't have any faith in politics anymore. I'm a libertarian, but before anything, I'll put the gospel. What does the gospel tell me? What is the teaching of the church about justice, about truth, about divine revelation? What does it say? That's where I'll sit, in front of all of that. But that being said, this is a function of the church, a function of the church corporate, a function of what Jesus set down. People can try to refute St. Peter as being important, but the scriptures testify against you, folks. They testify against you. Peter, feed my sheep. Peter, feed my sheep. Peter, feed my sheep. 3 times. And then the 3 denials, and then his almost breakdown after he realized what had happened and what he'd done. Peter has a significant role in the history of salvation and in the history of the church, a significant role. But I find it despicable when people will make fun of one of the successors of St. Peter. And now I will not say that he's a stand-in as the high priest. That's a really, really, that's a folding and a twisting of doctrine. Christ is the high priest. You know, the vicar of Christ is his minister, his representative, his assistant, his disciple. That stand in for him until he returns again. So, you know, when people do things like that, I find it despicable. And then I was watching some of the commentators, and I was shocked at some of the things that were said. One person called the reign. I really hate that word reign. But the legacy, that's much better. The legacy of Pope Francis, his exact words were, we should talk about its inadequacy. And when I listened to that, you know, I love Raymond Arroyo. I mean, he didn't say it, or was it him? It may have been somebody else who said it. But, you know, I sat with Raymond Arroyo for almost a good part of almost 2 weeks when St. John Paul II passed. Now, we were living in Midwestern place, Midwest Capital Management, owned property, and we were simulated so much those years when Pope Benedict passed. I didn't even know it until long after. You know, our car was being messed with, we were being simulated. Sometimes we didn't have a vehicle. This stuff repeats. That's why it's time to be, you know, it's time to do something to bring attention for my children. Because this stuff needs to stop. It's taking my life. And I'm not going to have some Joe Schmo set up with their friends to pretend adopt my children in the Philippines, or to pretend adopt my children in the States so they can traffic them because they got the right connections. Since everybody knows who's involved, knows what's happened to her mother. But I will say that I just think it's despicable, the things that people have done to Pope Francis in his name. And, you know, as far as an inadequate papacy, I find that absolutely laughable, considering he's the only pope out of the past, let's see, we've been dealing with this issue since the 70s or 80s. So we'll say out of the past 4 popes, he's the only one to address, you know, the climate that's been created to allow for abuse to continue, be covered up, and for predators to be moved around. And he's also the one who's opened up the church more to the world, so that these stereotypes of Catholics that still continue, especially deacons and priests and sisters, these stereotypes still continue about their sexuality, about their, you know, behaviors off of the, away from, you know, their convent or their monastery, or away from the altar, or away from the, you know, community of prayer. These stereotypes and this insulting behavior still continue. Only now it's worse. Because now somebody who's Catholic, who's visibly Catholic, hugs a man, hugs a woman, or hugs a child, automatically, boom, people start talking. Or even hugs another man, or shakes his hand, or does a chest thing, where you shake hands and then you hit chest like people do like we did in football. I mean, I only played 1 year, but we did do that. But people say things, and this kind of thing is also despicable. But to criticize the Holy Father, he's the only one who addressed with it. We call him Holy Father because, yes, he is holy and he is our spiritual father. We could call him Sanctified Shepherd as well. Would that make people mad? It's all about loading words. Oh, are you pro-life or are you anti-abortion? Again, loading words. It's all about marketing. As somebody with life coach, graduate background, graduate certificate, I know a little bit about marketing. Half of our graduate program was in marketing. But anyway, so he's the only one to have dealt with a serious problem by addressing it, by putting mechanisms in place to prevent it and to protect children and to help victims, and to create systems that better identify people with certain patterns, or in the beginning stages in their training, people with certain behaviors to identify them. Yeah, people are going to fall through, but people always will. We're human. You can't catch everything. And another thing, considering the size of the church, Eastern and Western, both rites, both sides, both lungs, to quote St. John Paul II, we're the least of the world's problem when it comes to predators. Statistically and population, how could I say? Population-wise speaking, we're the least of the world's problem. Again, comes to stereotypes. He's also dealt with banking problems, people in the curia who are abusing their power, using their authority within the church to unprofessionally mingle with non-ecclesial groups regarding money and improper spending. People just paint him as this liberal, out of control. Not at all. How many popes have stepped up to the desk and pulled out the accounting books and said, look, here, we're messing up. Fix it. None. He did. He said, look, we're overspending here. These properties need to be consolidated or sold. Over here, this needs to be done. Over here, we're burning money here for no reason at all. Stop it. He's the only one. Yeah, people are sad that churches are being consolidated. This is not the Vatican's fault. This is because we're not on fire for evangelism. When people make an anti-Catholic statement, we're silent. Instead of clothing it in rhetoric to twist the thinking, to turn somebody's thinking and reframe it in a positive manner to evangelize. When people ignore our practices, our culture, our beliefs, or they characterize, all Catholics are the same. Really? Well, you got some that speak Syriac, Aramaic, Jesus' language. Then you get others that speak an ancient form of Egyptian that's closer to what the pharaohs talked. Yeah, they're Catholic too. Then you got others speaking a unified Slavic language that was taught by two saints that specifically went to bring Christianity to the Slavs. Yes, people who were at one time, thousands of years ago, barbarian slaves. That's what they called them, barbarian slaves. And now the Slavic and Slavonic is one of the most important and most beautiful and most powerful elements of Catholicism, both Eastern and Western. And there's another thing people Again, even if there's a different language spoken church, they don't realize the great diversity of liturgy all within one church. Traditions so different. People don't realize that even amongst African Catholicism, several rites that are created right in Africa based on cultural traditions of various peoples within Africa. The great diversity of the church. So we're not all the same. Yeah, many of us may speak Latin or want to learn Latin or have learned it, but not just Latin. You got Slavonic, you have Latin, and then in Africa, you have some of the more commonly used languages in Africa. Oh, then you got Spain, and well, then you're going to go into Spanish. Then you have Mexican Spanish. Then you have other Central and South American versions of Spanish. Well, then you can go over to the Philippines and you have Tagalog, which is a merger of the traditional Bayan tongue, which used to be spoken in the Philippines, with Spanish, Tagalog. Great diversity of the church. Not all Catholics are the same. So he opened up the doors so people could see, and he brought things under control as far as financial gain. He protected families. He reached out to the evangelical world, even praying and having worship ceremonies. A worship ceremony, charismatic worship with evangelicals. Protestants. Has that ever been done? Never. He went to, as they did say in the presentation for the funeral, they did say, yeah, of all the popes, he's went to the most remote places, the places where there may only be a couple of thousand Catholics. Mongolia, where some of our ancestors hail from, in my family, me. There's the other places that he's went. Oh, he's invited very remote South American, actually it would be Mesoamerican, anyway, Latin America, well, we'll say Amazonian, I guess we could call it. I think they were Amazonian tribes to celebrate, their various cultural phenomenon while worshiping God. And some people criticize this, but having traveled like I have, when I see Guan Yin in a Chinese house, that reminds me of Our Lady. When I go somewhere and I see a painting of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Guadalupe, the first thing I think of is of Juan Diego, and then I think of the great power and all the glory that came to the Lord through him and through that apparition. So is it really so bad? And when I hear people speak of Theotokos, and they think of a picture or a drawing of the earth, I think of, that's a really powerful analogy. Our earth gives us our food. The earth gives us our water, our shelter. She's where we go when we pass forward into the next life, the next stage. So I think that's a pretty powerful imagery, comparing Mother Earth to Theotokos. Again, glory to the Lord, because the great powerful things he's made. So I don't think it's so bad. So they did speak, that was an important thing to bring up. He reached the remote. The GLBTQ plus community. If people are married, things are complicated. To be welcoming and try to bring them back to the church in one way or another. But to a priest that wants people to participate in the sacraments, they'll work things through. They'll work things through to help that, a gay couple's married. I mean, I encountered this recently, and you have to give people alternatives, at least to bring them back to the Christ. Well, if you don't feel that you want to return to the church, there are other churches, or maybe test the love of your marriage for a while. while you integrate back into the church. And then find a priest that understands the GLBTQ plus community. And then find ways where you can practice your faith within the limitations of the church. And I'm sure the time will come when it's already started, when we'll work through these things, realizing that the gay community is not going to go away. Now, I'm not saying that we should, be teaching everybody how to be gay, or teaching them that, hey, you're 5, you're gay, or teaching that 8-year-old, yeah, you may be transgender. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that we have to have an openness and understanding that people are who they are. You can't change that. And, I'm not saying that I, support anything for children. They're children. I do not support that. But if children want to explore in the confines of their home, if a boy wants to wear a dress and, try to understand that, I don't know, it'd be up to the parents. It could be good or bad. It depends how you frame it. Maybe through this, the boy can understand, hey, you need to treat your wife better. You want to wear a dress? Okay, then you're going to do some more traditional things, You could turn it into it doesn't have to be destructive. You could teach him, okay, if you think all women are going to wear a dress, so you're going to do laundry and stuff today too, there's ways you can frame things to make it a positive ending. Now, again, I'm not saying that we should be pushing people in one direction or another, but we have to realize that LGBTQ plus community is here to stay. We don't want people living in closets. We don't want people feeling hopeless or alienated or suicidal or unwanted in our country. That's not what we want. That's not what this country was built on. And that's certainly not what Jesus was about. Certainly not. So, anyway, Pope Francis, did his best to try to reach out. Things may change in 100 years. Things may not. But the fact of the matter is, they have a right to a civil union. So, if somebody's going to take away the right to a civil union, then I'm concerned, is somebody going to take away my right to have this YouTube channel? Or is somebody going to take away my right to have my CPL? Or is somebody going to take away my right to, supposed to be my right to go to church where I want, when I want? So, I'd be very careful with talking about taking away somebody's right to do this or to do that or to go here or go there or say this or say that or love this person or love that person. As long as it's legal, of course. I'd be very careful. And I say this myself, especially myself as a libertarian. I'm very careful when I talk about taking away another person's rights. So he tried to work through the things that are going on with LGBTQ plus community. He addressed the problems within the curia, and even down to, the local diocese of things happening that, wasteful spending, abuses of power, old boys, or in some cases, old girls network. He addressed a lot of things. He addressed an openness, if you notice, through every single rite that happened. Even in Easter, you see a lot more inclusion of the Eastern churches, which makes me happy. The first time I went to a Ukrainian rite liturgy, I was sold. I love the Eastern rites. That's why I can be bi-ritual. We don't have an Eastern Rite church around us, but I already made it known to my last bishop, my preference. But, I could go to either, though. When I converted to Catholicism, I memorized the Roman Rite Mass. The Novus Ordo, I memorized it. And I don't have a problem with it. Novus Ordo or Latin Rite. Whatever my church says for worship is considered acceptable for the faithful, I will go with it. I'm not going to argue or complain because I believe in those liturgical commissions, all the way down from the local diocesan level all the way up to the curia. All of those masters and PhDs, they know what they're talking about. They know what they're researching. They know the texts. Just like the people with the theological commissions, they have the masters. Well, so do I, but they have the PhDs. They have the multiple masters. And many more of them read the languages than I do. So I believe in the system that's been created, the church. I believe in the leadership that's been placed to guide me and my family. And so I believe in the things that he did. It's far from an inadequate papacy. Far from it. He went to Mongolia, one of the most remote places on the planet. I think that's enough said right there. Vast majority of people can't survive in the low oxygen environment. The intense heat in 1 minute, and then you go 100 miles and you're somewhere where it's intensely cold. You're walking up a mountain one place, and then boom, all of a sudden you're walking in a flat prairie with yaks, water buffalo, or no. Yak is not a water buffalo. A yak is just a yak, like a carabao. But actually, a carabao is a water buffalo. So I think a yak is more similar to a buffalo or bison, I think. Anyway. So I think that's enough said right there. That's a beautiful papacy. And someone that did as much as he could possibly do. And we can't forget what he did before he was even in the curia, when he said back in Buenos Aires, you clergy step back from public office. We're supposed to be ministers of the gospel, not ministers of the state. It's a beautiful papacy, and he will be missed much. Never forget the papacy of Papa Francisco.